Welcome to the Badlands. In a change to regular programming, in this episode, I'm not talking to someone else that is currently looking for a new role, but rather someone that could help us all out. Today, I'm speaking with Hasan Khair. Hasan is CEO of Mavericks Unlimited, a leader development consultancy, and as of last week, founder and CEO of Tyllr, a new platform for management development. Formerly, he was the EMEA HR chief for Saatchi & Saatchi. He's an executive coach and passionate about helping others find purpose and open new chapters in their careers and life. So I thought, given the number of people in a similar situation to me, hearing from Hasan might spark an idea or two. And maybe the way out of the Badlands isn't a straight line back into an agency or marketing role. Maybe we could apply our talents in other ways. So please welcome Hasan. Has, how are you? Thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it, buddy.
I'm doing well. Delighted to be here. Thanks for having me. Busy week last week. We might
Yep.
get into it a bit later.
Well,
Launched a
definitely.
new platform, new product. Had a nice bank holiday weekend with the kids. Feeling a little bit guilty that I'm not taking more time off this week, but I've got the back end of the week off, so I'm looking forward to an even shorter week than we might normally have with a bank holiday.
Nice. So look, my intro of you then, you clearly do just a ton of stuff, which is why I think it's super useful for my millions of listeners, because there's millions, Has, to hear from you. And was my intro of you sufficient? Why don't you give everyone listening kind of your career summary from your HR days into this world now that you occupy CEO of multiple companies, and how that pivot occurred for you and why it occurred. And because I think what I'm interested in people who are listening to this episode is taking away a sense of, you know what, I could do lots of other things. Because for those listening, I know Has and I have been talking on a personal level. For me, as my time in the Badlands, I've started to reflect on what I'd like to do going forwards, and it might require a change out of advertising and marketing and moving into something else. And Hasan is his story is akin to that, and he can also help people think about it, and he also can literally help people do it. So, Has, can you give everyone a sense of who you are and what you've been doing?
Yeah, sure. Firstly, very, very accurate description of my journey. Thank you for that. Yeah, well, look, I think the truth is I was walking the Badlands 10 years ago. So so my backstory is I started out in retail, did that for about 6 years, saw a pathway heading towards being a regional manager of a retail group that really didn't excite me. Pivoted into HR, studied part-time whilst I was working full-time, which was full on, but I was really energized. Everything that I loved about the retail job was all around the people side. So it made sense to kind of move into a profession around people. And then I joined, so it was Virgin Megastores. I used to work for Virgin. And then I moved out of Virgin into the creative industries, went to do a 3-month consulting gig at Grey. And that was my first taste of advertising. And this was Grey when it was near Great Portland Street. And I just loved it because it was the Wild West and there was a lot of opportunity. And I was always quite organized and disciplined in the way that I approached kind of my people operations. So I just thought it was fertile ground for me to come and make a name for myself. I left the Grey gig, went to their PR arm, which was GCI, helped merge that with Conan Wolf. That was part of WPP. And then was headhunted to go over to be the HR director at Fallon. 3 months into that role, I was promoted into being the Europe, Middle East and Africa HR director for Saatchi & Saatchi Network. And then I spent 4 years, really honing my craft as an HR leader. And then from there, I was headhunted to another firm. It was private equity backed. I got really excited at the idea of all the upsides, didn't really think about the downsides. 3 months in, the private equity firm decided that they were going to disband the corporate structure that I just joined. And I was told that I was going to be leaving the company alongside some other executives. And that was what happened, almost 10 years ago. So I was walking the Badlands for a while. And,
You were a pioneer, Has. You were one of the first.
yeah, I guess I was. And, for me, I guess I had the fortune of finding out about it in, I think, around July, but didn't actually leave the business until the end of the calendar year. So I had time to think about what I wanted to do. I was able to fire up my network, having worked in in advertising and the creative industry for as long as I had, I'd built a bit of a network up. So I was lucky that I was able to move into consulting fairly quickly. I guess the thing to talk about was I had just been booted out of a very well-paying job with a lot of security, a lot of jobs. Well, not that much security, but financially, it felt more secure than starting a consultancy. 3 kids, 2 very young at the time, and I was sort of thinking, okay, this consulting thing's good. I'll keep doing it. I'm enjoying it. It's making me feel like I've got some purpose, and I need to go and find another big job. There was a part of me that was not overly excited by the idea of going in and being an HR chief again, but I was doing the rounds. And what I found though was that the experience of working with recruiters, no shade on recruiters, I've got loads of friends who are, but my experience as a candidate was very different to my experience when I was a client. Very different indeed, and it was disheartening. I was finding that the conversations weren't going anywhere. I wasn't getting feedback, and I've just always been somebody that has, trusted myself, backed myself, and trust my instincts. And my instincts were telling me I needed to push further into the consultancy thing. And so the last 10 years have been me really, not having a plan B. Plan A is just building the consultancy. I started where it was just myself and paired up with my very first coach who I had when I was at Saatchi. He became my business partner and we built Mavericks Unlimited for the last decade. It was just the 2 of us for the first few years. Then we took on associates and sort of built up the consultancy practice. So we do executive sort of team development. We do strategy facilitation on Mavericks. And then in lockdown, remember that period? We developed our first digital learning product called the Maverick Managers Toolkit, and that was to help managers get foundational management skills in place. And then we just launched Tyllr last week, as you mentioned, which I'm really proud of, which is an evolution of the product. So it happened by accident. I've taken a long way of saying this. It happened by accident. I was made redundant. But then I think I just was able to start listening to my intuition and just pulling on that thread.
Yeah, and so thank you for sharing that. I think there's a couple of things that I take out of it, and I'm hoping that people listening to this take that, sometimes these awful periods where you think, fuck, how am I going to get back into this? It does lead to other things. It can lead to other great things. And one of the things you and I have been talking about in our personal conversations on the side has been like finding that thing you're passionate about. It's a big part of it, right? Moving forwards, because when you start thinking about the next 20, 25 years, you want to be doing something that you love doing. Everyone wants to be doing that, right? And as much as you love working in marketing and advertising like I do start to think, well, what else could I do? And your journey seems to be such a similar arc, even though it was a decade ago. So if you can think back to that time, clearly now you have this successful number of companies. But at that time when you were thinking back to that time, if there was a piece of advice that you could now give someone like me or the people listening who are also in the Badlands, what were the main things that you'd ask people to think about if they start to think about, well, what else could I do? Because I think it's a question that you start to tinker with the longer you're in the Badlands, right? There's an inevitability to, well, there are no normal jobs for me to apply to, the jobs that I've been doing for the last 20 years. So you start to think, well, what else could I do? Where else could I put my time and effort? What advice would you give yourself 10 years ago that you'd like people to think about right now?
Yeah, great question. I think, so yeah, as well as kind of doing all the things that we just talked about, I trained as a coach and now I'm an executive coach. I work with leadership teams, I work with individuals. One of the things I talk about in my coaching often is the notion of put your own oxygen mask on first. So my advice to anybody who might be going through a similar situation is put your own oxygen mask on first. And for those that can't kind of picture the analogy, it's, when you're on a plane and you're about to take off and you look at the sort of the emergency instructions on the plane, it shows you that, in the event of an emergency, the oxygen mask popped down. and you have to put it on first. Your instincts, if you've got dependents, if you've got loved ones around you, might be that you put the oxygen mask on them first because you want to look after them. But if you don't do it for yourself first, there's no way you'll be able to do it for them. So often, if you're at a certain point in your life, there's going to be other considerations. You might be thinking about people that rely on you, that depend on you, your ability to kind of keep the household going. And so that often will inform your decision making and your thinking, quite understandably. But you have to put your own oxygen mask on first. So you have to think, what do I need first? What do I need to do? What do I need in terms of my own mental health? What do I need in terms of my own structure? What do I need in terms of making me happy? It's not indulgent. It's you're just kind of taking your oxygen first before you can give it to others. So what I did was I knew I had all of the pressures around me. I knew I had a very, a young family, 3 kids, I was the sole breadwinner. There was just a lot on my shoulders. But I didn't allow myself to get stuck in that space. And I was able to kind of put on my own oxygen mask and say, right, what do I need to do to make this work? Because the signals from the market were like, this is going to take a long time, or we're not interested in the way that you're wishing to sell yourself. So I put my own oxygen mask on first. And what that involved was looking at what I felt I needed to do if I was going to do this consultancy thing, what else do I need to add to my armory, my set of skills? I'd always felt like I'd been a coach in my HR roles, but I wasn't really a formally trained coach. And I learned really subsequently through doing my training that I was a mentor. I wasn't really a coach. So one of the things I knew I needed to do was go and train to be a coach. And then the other thing I did, and I really recommend this, is try and put your plan on a page. So if, for example, your former life was one job and it kind of delivered all these different hygiene factors, a certain salary, a certain, level of sort of expectations that you have, things that it would cover for you, your new plan has to equal that or more. Like, you have to believe that you're capable of at least achieving what you had and more. And so what I did was, coming away from one of those coach training sessions, actually, I was full of vigor, full of energy. And I came home, it's quite late, and I just put my plan on a page. And my plan involved some consulting, it involved some coaching, it involved some NED work. And it was all fiction at this point. Well, a lot of it was fiction, but it gave me some energy. I was then able to go and take that plan on a page to my partner, and I enrolled her in my vision for what I think, my future could look like. And then I started to move on from there. And that then started to help inform my decision making around, what I would say yes to, what I wouldn't say no to, how I would structure things. Because even though I had the plan on the page, and this is really important, you don't suddenly just jack all your other efforts in. You don't suddenly stop looking for a job. I didn't suddenly go, right, that's it, I'm not looking for a job anymore. It just helped you put the right level of priority and the right level of weighting to the effort that you're putting into those things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And it obviously strikes with me in that the way I'm approaching things at the minute, and for people listening, I think it's an important part of it. There's almost like a couple of tracks, right? You've got your first track, which is I'm applying for the things I can apply for immediately, which if you're lucky enough and something comes up, go for it, because you can slip into that. But I think what's occurred to me at this stage in my life and career, that I should be doing the other track as well. So looking at the new, the next, the alternative, and how I move forwards for the next 25 years. Given that's what's happened at the moment with the Badlands, if that happened again in another 2-3 years, then you've got another 2-3 years of life on you and more responsibility and things. So I'm keen to kind of move off at some point. And like you say, having that plan is an important part of it. And the things you and I have been doing to help me understand what that plan could look like is invaluable. I think, and I talked about it on one of my other conversations, we're so used to in our careers helping brands and products develop these plans for launching or plans for going out into the world and, introducing a new thing to a new customer base. We almost need to treat ourselves like that a little bit now, right? If you want to look at how you take the brand Jared and move it into a different segment, a different industry, I need to plan it, because that's all we do at work for our clients. So kind of start to do that for yourself. It's a slightly different way of looking at your career journey, how you find a new career. You need to almost plan it out more than just think, well, I'm available. That's not enough. You have to from a network point of view, like how do you start reaching out into new networks and things like that? Do you have any advice on that side of things? That once, if someone has that view of I'd love to do this, like if they've got that kind of mapped out in their head, what are some of the key steps they should start looking at from a network point of view or a kind of outreach point of view? Do you have any thoughts on that for people?
Yeah, sure. Firstly, I really like the idea of like looking at it with a different lens. Reframing is, again, another really powerful technique that we use in coaching. If you look at something with the same perspective constantly, you're never going to be able to see the different angles, the different kind of shapes, the different possibilities. So you sort of looking at yourself almost, in an outer body way, looking at your brand and looking,
Like
what
third
needs to
party.
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, third party, exactly. More objective. I think that's really powerful. In terms of, before I sort of get into like networking and how to kind of tap into that, you need to do a bit of work before you like going to market and having conversations. Is sort of towards the end of the mid part of the journey, or the beginning of the end part of the journey. And why I think it's important is it's important for you to do some deep work and understand what you're wanting to say, because if you don't believe it yourself, the market's not going to believe it. So you need to have a lot of conviction around what you want to go and tell the market. Now, just to kind of reassure people, this doesn't have to take 6 months. You can do it in a dedicated time. That might take an afternoon. It could take a day. It might take 2 days. But just being really focused on kind of what it is you're trying to you want to say about yourself in a new way. So some advice I have before you even get started is, I know because I've spent a lot of time with people who have been transitioning. Either they've kind of had their livelihood taken or they've decided they wanted to move. When you're out of work or when you're not working, it is tempting to just think, well, I'm going to wake up, I'll do whatever I need to do in the morning, and then I'll fire up the laptop and I'll just kind of apply, look. And you feel like just by doing that, you're putting your best efforts in.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important to work smart rather than hard. And I don't mean to be overly cliched, but you got to think that everyone that is in a similar situation is probably going to be, well, a lot of people, not everyone, is going to be doing the same sort of thing, right? So now it's much harder than it was even 10 years ago when I was walking the Badlands to get through the applicant tracking systems and kind of the algorithms and all that sort of stuff. So you have to think, okay, how am I going to do things differently, starting with myself? So I think, as I've sort of mentioned to you, Jared, it's so fundamental that you have a structure and a routine that involves personal care, that if you like running or if you like going to the gym, some personal fitness, that you set your day up in the right way, and that applying for jobs is a part of that day if it's important to you, but not the whole of the day. And then you're spending other time doing other things. And a big part of that is looking deeply and exploring, like, what is it that you've been having to ignore or push away because you've created an identity. So again, in coaching, we talk about this notion of intuition versus identity. When we're born with intuition, right? But then pretty early on, we start to form an identity. At school, where sort of, you might be a sports, you might be good at sports, so then you take on that identity. You might be academic, you take on that identity. You might be a joker, you take on that identity. And then all you're doing is building identity. And then when you take a job, you sort of keep layering on that identity, and before you know it, that's kind of what you know. And what you need to try and pull into is your intuition, and like, what are the things that really are going to drive me for this next chapter. And so you and I have talked about something that I've been using almost for a decade, with my coaching clients and friends, and anyone that'll listen, frankly, which is Ikigai. It's spelled Ikigai, and it's a Japanese philosophy. It's a way of being, and the Ikigai for Japanese people is the intersection of what I'm good at and what I love. And so all the things that you love in the world, and if you overlay that with all the things that you're good at, the intersection of those is your reason for being. There's no literal translation for Ikigai in the West. It's just, it roughly means why I get out of bed. And then the extended version that I've been using is, what I'm good at, what I love, what the world needs and what I can be rewarded for or what I can be paid for. So the idea of my journey, if we think about, me as a coach, I always loved working. I'm going to really shorthand this because I know I've been speaking for a long time without a breath.
No, that's good.
I've always loved working with people and kind of developing people and helping them be their best self. I'm good at a certain, things like org design, org development, coaching, mentoring, advice giving. What the world needs, I think it needs more empathetic, compassionate, experienced leaders in the coaching space. And how can I be rewarded? Well, I've built a reputation and a successful business through that. So I was able to find my Ikigai, and that's kind of, the center of those circles is where I've been, living for the last 10 years. But if I really boil it down even further, it's just, I get to help people be their best self in the world. And I do that through all my businesses or the, the bits of work that I do is simply just to try and help people be their best self. So that's, the power of Ikigai. I found it by accident because I just I was walking the journey. But, since finding this model and this principle, I've used it exclusively with all, people that are going through a journey. I think it's really powerful because it stops you from thinking, well, I better just apply for this job and that job and do this, to then starting to really explore what your next chapter might look like. And it gives you some courage and, I guess, confidence to then take it out. And just to finally answer your network thing, it comes after you've done a bit of that work. Yeah, sorry.
I was just going to say, Hus, before that, I can't stress enough to people listening who are in this kind of position that doing this sort of exercise or thinking about what Hus has been saying there, it's so important. And I think there's an arc that we've all gone through in these job searches where you start applying for stuff and you think, I don't want to work there, but it's the only one to apply for that day. And like you say, it's dangerous to start doing that. And when you advise me to have a look at this Ikigai philosophy and system, I found it so useful because what it does is it closes some stuff off that you just took for granted based on, like you say, how you've almost progressed over the last 20 years. And your identity is, well, I would introduce myself as I'm a client service guy from the ad industry. And it's like, well, that's not who I am. That's just the job I've done for the last 20 years. And what I love is XXX, or, so having the time and headspace to kind of unpack that is so vital for thinking about how you might move forwards. So I strongly recommend people do it. And I'm sure there's lots of ways of doing it, but I'll post a link to this kind of Ikigai model and approach for people to look into themselves. That's for sure. So sorry for interrupting. Great. I just wanted to let people know it's brilliant, and it gets you to go, oh Christ, I didn't think of that. Oh, I thought I was this, but it really helps you kind of laser focus in a little bit. So it's super useful. So yeah, on the network thing, you're right, because I went through a phase of I'd love to work in that. So then I'd write to them and they'd just go, no. And so you get really disheartened. So you're right. There's probably a time and a place that you need to start moving into the kind of reach out and outreach phase. So what's your view on that for people, Hass?
Yeah, I think not to get overly spiritual, but I've definitely become more spiritual as I've got older and more grey hair. It's you have to really believe in what you're saying. You have to manifest the energy. So when you start to network, it's like you've already done the work. And so when you start networking, you can either reconnect with people that you know, but with a new story, right? So, and I would encourage people to be vulnerable and rather than pretend you're something that you're not yet, because that's really obvious that you haven't done the journey yet. So being vulnerable and saying, hey, I'm moving into this space. I'm very passionate about it. Here's my perspective on it. This is the kind of thing that I am looking to do. Let's have a conversation. Is much better than saying I've already firmly established myself here. I've got no track record, but I know I'm here already. And I just think there's more power to the vulnerability. And then what's really good is that actually if you bring authenticity and vulnerability to people whether you know them or not. There's more openness. Not everyone. There's some some arseholes out there, but you just stay away from them and just lean into the people that receive your energy well. Networking, I've never been a fan of networking events, but I do really love networking, and networking is just community. So really it's just go and find communities, either one big community that you can sort of move around, or lots of micro communities. But the idea is just to kind of go and engage. It's really easy. It doesn't have to be, some people are going to be extroverts and love kind of the energy of groups. Others are possibly a bit more introverted. You don't have to do anything that doesn't feel comfortable to you in the beginning. But what I would say with any journey is that it's really important not to live in your comfort zone, and to kind of push yourself outside of comfort zone into that sort of, into the fear zone, which is, the bit that sits outside of your comfort zone. Because you have to go through the fear zone to kind of get into the growth zone. So you have to go into those places that aren't comfortable, into those new spaces. If you've been an ad person, but you're thinking of wanting to be, you want to bake sourdough, but you've never done it and you feel like you couldn't enter that community, just go and start dipping your toe in that water. Just go and sit amongst those people, see what's being said, pick up what you can. And before long, you'll feel like one of those people, because you've just been showing up and you've been absorbing it and you've been contributing to the conversation. And I think that's what I would say about networking. It's all about people. It's not about the events. It's not about, of course, there's going to be things that you can attend, but it's really about building new connections with new communities.
Yeah, excuse me, for sure. And look, I've been doing it on a personal level in my journey, and it's surprising. Again, you kind of lived in this fishbowl of the advertising world, so my entire professional network revolved around that. But in this kind of last 8-9 months, it's really broadened out, and it's super fun just to make these new connections. And you kind of are then open to new ways of thinking, new ideas and things. I guess one of the things I'd like maybe just to quickly touch on before we start to think about wrapping up was one of the fears I had, and it might be the fear that exists in people listening to this, if they start thinking I could move into X, Y, and Z, or I'd love to go and be a sourdough baker. And there's a weird kind of, in the ad world and marketing world, the people I'm speaking to, we all kind of started relatively towards the bottom, and now we might be towards the bottom of the top in our industry. And I think there's a fear attached to moving sideways or moving into totally different worlds, given the thought that you might have to start again, or you might have to go to the bottom of a new industry, and the fear that comes with that. Do you have any thoughts on that, Has, for people to? Because it's not necessarily not true, but there's probably different ways of thinking about it than just, oh shit, I'm going to have to start again. Do you have a view on that?
Yeah, I think the thing is, there's no straightforward answer on this. It's all around kind of your own criterion and hygiene factors around your decision. So if the profession you want to enter requires sort of a depth of academic experience or academic knowledge, and you might have to go back to university, then that might be it might be a journey that you would want to go on, because it's connected to kind of what energizes you and what you want to be doing for the next X number of years. But for others, it may be that they don't want to take that step back and they don't want to start so low down. I think that's totally right and totally fair and totally just as well. So you have to think differently about a few things. Number one is connected to the work I was talking about earlier, which is it's just getting really, really like confident around your value in the world. So you may not be choosing to continue the pathway that you have carved out up to this point in that profession, but it doesn't mean your value is diminished. You've got value that you bring to a new industry, and you've got to really own it. I think you should, if you have the confidence and you have the kind of the infrastructure and ecosystem around you to be able to just have non-negotiables, if there's a certain threshold, whether it comes to income or the kind of work that you're doing, just have that as a hard boundary and say, I'm not going to do that. And then I guess the other things just to add is, sometimes it's an and, not an or, right? If you go or, it's binary. I'm going to do this or that, right? Whereas and gives you possibilities. You can keep doing something for a while, and you can build up a side hustle, or you can build up a small business, just to make sure that it feels right. You sort of slowly build up your credibility, or rapidly build up your credibility by doing something as well as something else. So you don't necessarily have to drop your income. The idea of a portfolio lifestyle, I think, is talked about quite often. And often it's talked about when, say, somebody's left corporate life and they are wanting to have a portfolio career where they've got lots of different fractional roles and things like that. For me, portfolio is that, but it's just a philosophy. It's like thinking, okay, I don't need to just have one stream of activity like I used to, one job, one income stream, but actually I could be doing multiple things with multiple streams, that they might be smaller streams, but they add up to one, decent sized, stream. Call it income, call it work, whatever that might be. So I think it's, just to summarize, it's make sure you have your own sense of your value and your non-negotiables, and feel strong around centering around those, and then use the philosophy of and versus or.
Yeah, I love it. It's it's so powerful when you start thinking like that. And weirdly, I think today's youth, they're instinctively a little bit more like that. And there's my conversations with folk, they've all been of a certain age, and we all grew up in a way, in a time when, the career advice at school was finish school, get a job, do that job. All right. And I think today's youth just don't have that kind of restraint, the side hustle gigs and all that type of stuff, this kind of self-owning themselves and their brand and their means to generate income and doing things they enjoy. I think it's quite powerful, and slightly retraining our minds. My mind has been a big part of that in my journey, just to look at trying new things and doing new things, out of your comfort zone, like you were saying. So it's I advise it as well for my millions of listeners. There is millions.
Yeah.
People don't believe there's millions.
I have no doubt millions are listening, tuned in, and I think, though, just to say that finding ways to express yourself creatively is so important in life. Not everyone, some people might go, well, I'm not very creative, but like a creative expression is so important because it fuels thinking for other things. So you doing this podcast, it has several benefits. It has benefits to you because you get to have conversations with hopefully interesting people, but also, the people that are listening are going to take something away from it. They might just take one nugget, but it then gives them something. It sparks their creativity, their curiosity. For some people, creative expression might just be cooking a different dish. It doesn't have to take a form of. But I think it's really, really important, really powerful. And obviously, all the millions of listeners are going to be picking up on all the tips from all your conversations.
Well, let's hope. And so I think with that, we'll probably wrap this one up, because it's a slightly different episode to what I've been doing. But it's become clear to me, and it's become clear in my conversations with people who find themselves in this weird stage of their career, largely for the first time in their careers, that you do start to think about moving forwards differently. And my conversations with you in my own personal life have been super helpful. So I can't thank you enough for that. Has has got a great number of businesses, like I tried to explain in the business. So Has, how can people get in touch with you or find you if they want to follow up on some of the things we've talked about? This wasn't designed to give you a platform for my millions of listeners to promote your business, Has, but you can do, because it's all about networking and getting.
Well, firstly, I appreciate
getting in touch with you.
Yeah, I appreciate the kind words. Best way to get hold of me, you can find me on LinkedIn. So Hasan Khair, HasanKhair. Or you can email me at hasan@mavericksunlimited.com. I will always, respond to anyone that comes and wants to have a chat. I love doing this work. Hopefully that's come across in our conversation. And I am really committed to helping people find their sort of next chapters, either through kind of the platforms that we're creating, or just coming on conversations like this. I just want to help.
Amazing, thank you, Has. I appreciate it, and good luck with everything you're doing. It's really inspiring when you kind of hear of your journey and you see the things that you're doing. So I'm hoping that the listeners do take something from this. So thank you again, and appreciate your time, mate.
Cheers for having me, Jared. Thank you.
No worries, mate. Thank you.